The stinging slap landed on Amelia's cheek before she even had time to understand what was happening. She was stunned, speechless, unable to utter a single cry. Across from her, Ethan, her husband, was giving her a look as cold as ice, a look that could freeze hell itself. All because of a casual remark, a throwaway comment about the type of coffee she had bought. Amelia knew that Ethan's rage never needed a valid reason. But tonight, something had shattered. This wasn't the first time, certainly not. She told herself, I can't live like this anymore. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of humiliation, of hidden blows and silent tears. And yet until now, she had always found a reason to stay. But tonight, as she tasted the metallic tang of blood in her mouth, Amelia realized that the love that had once bound her to Ethan was now just a faded memory. In her mind, a promise was born. This slap would be the last. Before reaching this point, Amelia had once believed she had found the ideal man in Ethan. He had a presence that immediately commanded attention. He was the rising star of a prestigious investment firm in Chicago, a decisive and ambitious man. Where other men hesitated, Ethan decided. Where conversations meandered through trivialities, he got straight to the point. A few months after their first meeting in a chic rooftop restaurant with a panoramic view of the sparkling Chicago skyline, he sat across from her, looking at her with an intensity that almost flustered her. After a few light exchanges, he leaned slightly towards her and without a hint of hesitation declared, I don't want to waste time. You're the woman of my life. Marry me. Amelia had laughed, surprised by the abruptness of the proposal. So soon, but we've only just met. Ethan smiled with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. When you know, you know. And I know. She had lowered her head, her cheeks flushing. No one had ever spoken to her with such conviction. She who had known lackluster romances and indecisive men suddenly felt chosen, desired, placed at the center of a pre-written future. The feeling was intoxicating. Their wedding was lavish, a magnificent affair on the shores of Lake Michigan, full of promises and the admiration of all. She felt as if she were floating drunk on this attention, convinced that a radiant future was beginning. Everything seemed to have come together: love, security, prestige. Even her parents, naturally cautious, had smiled with pride. That night, Amelia told herself that she had chosen the right path. But the honeymoon was short-lived. Just a few weeks after the wedding, Ethan's first remarks began to take on a different tone. At first they were subtle, then they became orders. Those jeans don't flatter you at all. That dress is too tight. You don't need to show off your body like that. Amelia had tried to protest one morning as she was putting on a pair of jeans that made her feel comfortable. But why I feel fine in this? Ethan crossed his arms, his gaze hardening. Because I don't want other men staring at you. But wear the loose dress. The tone allowed for no discussion. Amelia had complied partly out of love, partly out of fear of disappointing him. She told herself it was just a manifestation of jealousy, perhaps even of passion. Gradually her wardrobe changed. Bright colors disappeared, replaced by somber, dull tones. Fitted clothes were pushed to the back of the closet. When she looked at herself in the mirror, Amelia sometimes had the feeling of looking at a stranger, a faded silhouette. You look better like this, simple, discreet, Ethan would repeat to her with a satisfied smile. She nodded without replying. But deep down she felt that each baggy dress was a part of herself being slowly stripped away. Then came the stricter prohibitions. Going to work, out of the question. Ethan had said it bluntly one morning when she mentioned the possibility of returning to her old position in her marketing company. You don't need it. You have everything here. But I love my job. Amelia, listen to me. A married woman doesn't need to be running around in offices. Your job is us. The word us sounded like a prison. She had resigned herself to staying at home, locked in their luxurious but cold penthouse. Friends, family, she saw them less and less. Each visit became a battle. Even her own mother had to manage on her own to visit her. One evening, Amelia pleaded, Could you at least pick up Mom from the train station? She's tired. She's come a long way. Ethan didn't even look up from his phone. She's not my mother. She'll find a way to get here. The words landed like a stone. Amelia thought of her mother elderly, dragging her suitcase through the streets of a city she didn't know well. A knot of guilt tightened in her stomach. The next day, her mother arrived alone, exhausted but trying to smile. "Everything's fine, darling. Don't worry." Amelia felt ashamed. How could she tell her mother that Ethan wouldn't even make such a simple gesture? Each new prohibition nibbled away at another piece of her freedom. Ethan, on the other hand, acted as if everything was natural. When she dared to protest, he dismissed her words with a wave of his hand. "You're overreacting. I only want what's best for you." But Amelia knew. What's best was another way of saying obey. Outwardly, Ethan presented a perfect image. He helped his family generously. His sisters called him constantly for favors, and he always came running without a word of complaint. In everyone's eyes, he was a chivalrous man, a solid pillar of the family. But at home, he became another person, a silent tyrant who cut off all her initiatives. And his fits of anger always ended the same way. Ethan's violence was not limited to words. Sometimes it erupted into unpredictable actions. One evening, he came home much later than usual. Amelia, worried, had asked, "Ethan, why have you been coming home so late lately?" He stared at her as if that simple question were a provocation. His face hardened, and with a sudden gesture he grabbed her arm. "It's none of your business," he roared. The grip was so strong that tears welled up in her eyes. She tried to pull away, but he pushed her against the wall. He stood there facing her, his eyes red with anger. Then, as always, the storm suddenly subsided. He let her go and walked away. The next day he returned like an actor reprising his role, a sparkling jewelry box in his hand. "I was a little on edge. Here, take this." It was an exquisite diamond necklace from Tiffany & Co. Amelia looked at him, not touching the gift. "What I need isn't a gift, Ethan," he replied, his tone impatient. "Stop being so dramatic. We love each other, don't we?" So she opened the box with a forced smile. The necklace was cold against her skin like a diamond handcuff. Day by day, Amelia felt the walls closing in. She no longer had freedom, no longer had a voice. She obeyed. She smiled in public, but each smile cost her dearly. Years passed, and despite appearances, something was missing in Amelia and Ethan's home. A child. Amelia had seen doctors. The results showed that she had no particular problems. She had spoken to Ethan, who had flatly refused to do the same because, as he said, "I'm a man and everything is fine with me. I don't need a doctor to confirm that." This absence became a burden. Ethan hardly ever talked about it except to occasionally drop a sarcastic remark. "Maybe you weren't meant to be a mother." Family dinners were an ordeal for Amelia. She went there knowing in advance that she would be the target of barbs and mockery. Around the large dining table in her in-laws' luxurious home in the suburb of Lake Forest, laughter erupted. But as soon as eyes turned to her, the atmosphere changed. One Thanksgiving evening, as she was serving the turkey, Ethan's eldest sister, Sarah, spoke up in a sarcastic tone. "Still no baby, Amelia." "How strange. With a husband like Ethan, the problem must be with you." The others giggled, and Amelia felt her cheeks burn. She lowered her head, unable to reply. An aunt chimed in, shaking her head with a feigned sigh. "Poor Ethan, he deserves better than a useless wife." "A woman who can't have children," added another cousin, "is like a fruitless tree, just for decoration." Amelia felt her heart break a little more. She sought Ethan's gaze, hoping for support, a word to defend her. But he remained impassive, a slight smile on his lips as if all this amused him. "You're all exaggerating," was all Ethan said, but his tone was not one of defense, but of complicity with their attacks. Amelia continued to serve the plates, hot tears welling up in her eyes. That evening, on the way back to their penthouse with the Chicago city lights blurring through the car window, Ethan made no comment. Worse, he simply said, "You should learn to fight back. If you just let it happen, it's normal for people to talk to you like that." Amelia swallowed the bitterness. She knew he also suffered from this failure, But instead of facing it with her, he used it as another weapon to humiliate her. When the pain became too much to bear, she would open the refrigerator and devour whatever came to hand. Cakes, ice cream, leftovers from dinner. She ate to fill the void, to numb the pain. And the more she ate, the more weight she gained without realizing it. Each passing month was a disappointed wait. Gradually, hope faded, replaced by a bitter emptiness. She no longer recognized herself. The mirror in her bedroom, once a companion in her happy preparations, had now become an enemy. Every morning she reluctantly paused before it. She would hesitantly place a hand on her cheek, as if to awaken a woman who seemed to have disappeared. One evening Amelia summoned her courage. Ethan was sitting in his leather armchair scrolling through his phone, the blue light reflecting on his indifferent face. Their luxurious penthouse was silent, except for the soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of sirens rising from the streets of Chicago. She hesitated for a long time before speaking, her voice almost a whisper. Do you still find me beautiful?" Ethan looked up from his screen, his expression absent. He glanced at her quickly as one would observe a familiar object. "You've gained weight," he said casually. "You're not the same anymore." The words pierced Amelia's heart like a knife. Deep down, she had hoped for a sweet word, a little attention, even if forced. But there was nothing, only the raw, cruel truth. Amelia placed a hand on her stomach, on her hips. "So, you're not attracted to me anymore?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan sighed, already tired of the conversation. "Don't make a scene, I'm just saying what I see." He immediately buried his nose back in his phone, indifferent to the world around him. Amelia stood there motionless. Ethan's words echoed in her head. "You've gained weight, you're not the same anymore." From that day on, every meal became an internal battle. The isolation, the boredom, and the fear created a vicious cycle. Ethan, on the other hand, took meticulous care of his body. He joined a high-end gym and came home proud of his toned muscles and fitted clothes. Sometimes he would admire himself in the mirror with satisfaction, and then drop a comment in Amelia's direction. "You should try a little harder, but then again, you don't like to move." She felt humiliated, reduced to a failure. Intimate nights had become more of an ordeal for Amelia than a moment of sharing. Ethan treated her like a duty, a task to be accomplished before turning his back and sleeping. One evening, when she shyly tried to create a little closeness, a little tenderness, Ethan abruptly stopped. "Turn off the light." Amelia looked at him in surprise. "Why?" she asked. He looked at her with annoyance. "Because I don't want to see your fat body. It's better in the dark." Amelia obeyed and turned off the light, but inside something had broken forever. She tried despite everything to reach out to gently touch his arm, but Ethan pushed her away roughly. "Leave me alone, Amelia." So she curled up in bed, clutching the blanket to her as if it could fill the immense void he had left. Loneliness invaded her even in the most trivial gestures. One evening, while watching a comedy on TV, Amelia burst out laughing. She turned to Ethan, hoping to share this small moment of joy. But he didn't look up from his phone. His fingers continued to slide across the screen unfazed. Amelia's laughter died in her throat. When she wanted to share an idea or a thought, he silenced her. She felt like a fading voice in a room without an echo. Forced into silence so often, Amelia had finally almost stopped talking. His name was Liam. Amelia vaguely remembered meeting him for the first time years ago. Ethan had introduced him briefly at a business dinner, nothing more. At the time, he was just another face and acquaintance among others. But fate sometimes likes unexpected turns. One afternoon, as she was shopping on the Magnificent Mile, Amelia ran into him again. She was looking down, lost in thought, when a soft voice called her name. "Amelia." She looked up. Liam was standing there, smiling, seemingly as surprised as she was by this chance encounter. He was an architect, an old college friend of Ethan's, with whom Ethan had lost touch. They exchanged a few pleasantries. He asked her how she was, and for the first time in a long time, someone actually listened to her answer. In the following days, she often thought about that moment. And when Liam sent her a message on social media, "It was great to see you again," she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. They began to chat occasionally. Nothing compromising at first, just light discussions about books, new movies, the old buildings of Chicago. But Liam knew how to listen. He asked questions, waited for her answers, genuinely interested. What would have been a waste of time for Ethan became a real sharing for Liam. One evening as they were texting, Liam said, "You know you seem strong, but I get the feeling you're carrying a lot on your own." Amelia felt seen, through almost naked, and at the same time relieved. Finally, someone had seen what she was hiding from the world. Gradually, she began to look forward to his messages, a smile gracing her lips every time his name appeared on her screen. One evening, Liam asked her out for a coffee. Just like that. In a small, cozy cafe in Lincoln Park, nestled between old brownstone buildings, she sat across from him. The soft yellow light and the fragrant smell of roasted coffee enveloped them, creating a peaceful oasis away from the city's hustle and bustle. There across from him, she felt like a woman again, not a shadow in Ethan's penthouse. And when he asked, his warm brown eyes looking deep into hers, "Tell me the truth, Amelia. Are you happy?" She fell silent, unable to lie, but also unable to admit in words what her silence was already screaming. A tear rolled down her cheek and she quickly wiped it away, but it was too late. Liam had seen it. He said nothing more, just gently reached across the table and placed his hand on hers, a simple gesture that held more understanding and comfort than any words could. The days passed and the exchanges between Amelia and Liam became more frequent. With Liam, she laughed again sometimes at trivial things, sometimes for no reason at all. Their meetings, initially brief and innocent, gradually became longer. They would walk along the shores of Lake Michigan, the cool breeze blowing through her hair, or wander through the Art Institute of Chicago, silently admiring the masterpieces. Each moment seemed to rekindle a part of her that had died. One afternoon, as they were sitting on a bench in Millennium Park, watching the clouds drift by reflected on the sculptural surface of the bean, Liam looked at her more serious than usual. "Amelia, you know you're very important to me, right?" She lowered her head, flustered by his directness. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. It's in your eyes." He didn't need to say more. At that moment, Amelia felt an invisible line had been crossed. She struggled internally. Fear, guilt, the sense of the forbidden. But at the same time, a part of her, repressed for too long, was screaming that she had the right to live, to feel, to exist. Then came the more intimate touches. A hand held a little longer in the dark of a movie theater. A warm hug goodbye, before she returned to her cold life. Each small gesture was a spark in her darkness. One evening in a hotel room overlooking the Chicago River, they crossed the line. Amelia would always remember that first time not as an act of betrayal, but as a liberation. Where Ethan imposed coldness and humiliation, Liam brought warmth and tenderness. He looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. He touched her with adoration, whispering sweet words in her ear, praising the beauty she thought she had lost long ago. In his arms, Amelia no longer felt like a broken woman, but a woman desired, cherished, loved. The meetings continued. As soon as Ethan was on a business trip, as soon as there was an opportunity, Amelia would find Liam. Those stolen moments soon became her secret refuge. It was their own world, a small bubble of happiness and passion. In his arms, she found herself again the person she had been before Ethan suffocated the life out of her. However, each return home reminded her of reality. Ethan, his rages, his indifference. This double life was eating away at her, but she couldn't stop anymore. Liam was like air, and she had been holding her breath for too long. Weeks passed, and what had initially been a glimmer of hope in Amelia's life had become a reality she could no longer ignore. At first she thought it was just temporary fatigue, the result of sleepless nights and constant anxiety. But soon the signs became too clear to deny. The morning sickness, the sensitivity to smells and the subtle changes in her body that only she could notice. One morning alone in the large marble bathroom, she stared at the pregnancy test in her hand. The result was undeniable: 2 pink lines. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her panic astonishment, but also a strange joy that she hadn't felt in a very long time. And she was sure that this baby was Liam's. She immediately thought of Ethan. If he found out the truth, he would destroy her. She knew him too well. His wounded pride would not tolerate such a betrayal. However, an inner voice insisted, "This child is my chance. This child is life coming back." She told Liam the news a few days later at their usual cafe. His face changed as she said the words. Liam was silent at first, stunned, before hesitantly placing a hand on hers. "Amelia, it's our child." She nodded, unable to speak, her eyes filling with tears. He took a deep breath, and then his gaze softened, filled with a new determination. "Then we'll find a way. We'll protect him, and protect you." His promise was the lifeline she was desperately clinging to. The following months were filled with secrets, and each day was like a dangerous game of chess. Amelia walked on thin ice, feigning serenity, while inside her an unshareable truth was growing. Ethan, blinded by his own arrogance and indifference, suspected nothing. On the contrary, he convinced himself that this pregnancy was the result of his own efforts, another proof of his virility. At family dinners, he preened with confidence, placing a possessive hand on Amelia's shoulder. "Finally," he would say, puffing out his chest, "it's about time." His sisters applauded. Friends congratulated him. Everyone admired this future father, convinced that he had given Amelia what she had been waiting for years. Amelia, she just kept quiet, offering forced smiles, unable to confess that this victory was just a lie. Inside, she lived torn between 2 opposing forces. First, there was the fear that a small detail, a slip of the tongue, a too tender look exchanged with Liam could betray the truth. The fear above all of Ethan's reaction if he discovered the betrayal. Every day, Amelia walked a tightrope, at risk of falling at any moment. But as her belly grew, she felt a new strength growing inside her. It was the maternal instinct, a primal and powerful force. This child was not just a secret, it was her reason to fight. The day of the birth, as she held her tiny daughter in her arms, Amelia felt a profound change. In the eyes of that fragile being, a light she thought she had lost long ago was rekindled. She named her Hope. The weeks after the birth were a strange mix of happiness and anxiety. Amelia would spend hours gazing at her daughter. She felt reborn, and each smile from that little being reminded her why she had to endure. But Ethan, he hadn't changed. The pride of a new father was just a facade. At home, he was still himself. Authoritarian, verbally abusive, indifferent in his actions. "She cries too much, make her shut up," he would order coldly while trying to watch a football game on the large screen TV. Amelia would hold her daughter tight, her heart constricting. "She's just a baby, Ethan. I don't care. I need quiet." Every day the fear gnawed at her. She was afraid that one of Ethan's rages would fall on the child, as it had fallen on her so many times. It was in those moments that she seriously considered leaving. Liam, he remained discreet but always present. He sent encouraging messages, small gifts for hope delivered to a safe address of a friend. He was her link to another world, a world where love did not come with pain. "I'm here for you, Amelia," he constantly reminded her. "Whenever you're ready." At first, Amelia hesitated. Leaving meant losing everything: the house, what was left of her financial stability, the life she had known. But staying meant slowly dying and risking her daughter growing up in fear and in a toxic environment. She couldn't let Hope witness what she had endured. That night, the house was still shaking from Ethan's screams. He had slammed the bedroom door after accusing her. "You spend all your time with that baby, and you've completely forgotten about me. How much longer do you think I'm going to put up with this?" Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, her daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby, terrified by the screams, had cried for a long time before calming down. Every second spent here was becoming a risk. Every moment was a threat to her daughter. Her gaze swept over the luxurious but cold room, the expensive furniture, the soulless works of art. It was all just a gilded cage. The decision was made. It wasn't a sudden thunderbolt, but the slow accumulation of 1,000 small cuts, 1,000 humiliations, and now fueled by the fierce love for her daughter. The next day she feigned to follow her daily routine. She made Ethan's coffee, smiled and nodded as he gave her orders for the day. But as soon as his Audi left the building's garage, she sprang into action. She packed a few essentials into a small suitcase, clothes for her and Hope, a little cash she had secretly saved, and the only precious item she truly treasured, an old photo of her parents. Every noise in the penthouse made her jump, feeling as if Ethan was about to appear. Liam was waiting for her on a street corner a few blocks from her building. When he saw her arrive with the baby in her arms and a suitcase in her hand, he rushed to meet her. His face was full of concern. "Are you sure, Amelia? After this, there's no going back." She nodded, her gaze firmer than ever. "I'm sure. For her. For us." They got into the car. As the car merged into the traffic on Lakeshore Drive, Amelia glanced back at the glass and steel skyscraper she had once called home. It looked cold and foreign. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, the obstacles numerous. But that day, for the first time in years, Amelia no longer felt like a prisoner. She was no longer just a broken woman. She was a mother ready to do anything to protect her child. And beside her, Liam took her hand, a silent promise of a future. The escape was not an end. It was a beginning. Ethan came home that evening as irritable as usual after a long day of stressful meetings. He expected to see Amelia appear in the hallway with the baby in her arms, perhaps with a contrite look after last night's argument. But the penthouse was eerily silent, a heavy silence different from the usual quiet. "Amelia," he called, his voice echoing in the empty space. No answer. He strode towards the bedroom. The cradle was there, but empty, the small blanket strangely folded. His gaze immediately fell on the slightly ajar closet. A suitcase was missing. No, it can't be," he whispered, a cold feeling beginning to creep into his chest. He opened drawers, rummaged through the living room, searching every corner as if she might be playing hide and seek. But the truth was there, undeniable. She was gone. "But why?" he yelled into the empty apartment. Not a single note left, not a word of explanation. He remembered himself just last night accusing her of not caring about him, of having despised her tears, of having ignored her shattered look. And this was the result, after a fruitless search of every room in the house. Ethan finally grabbed his phone. He tried calling Amelia several times to no avail, the call going straight to voicemail. With a cold determination, he dialed another number. When Amelia's mother's tired voice answered, he immediately asked, "It's Ethan. Is Amelia with you?" Amelia's mother seemed to be searching for her words. "Why?" she finally asked softly. Ethan felt his irritation rise. "Don't play that game with me. I'm asking a simple question. Is she there? Yes or no?" The older woman replied, "No, Ethan, she's not here." Ethan snarled, "Don't lie to me. She took a suitcase she left with the child. She must be somewhere, you must know." Amelia's mother replied in a firm tone without raising her voice, "I don't know where my daughter is. And even if I did, I have no obligation to tell you." Ethan felt a surge of rage in his throat. "She's my wife. She has no right to disappear like this." But his mother-in-law remained firm. "Ethan, listen to me. If Amelia left, it's because she had her reasons. Maybe you should think about that instead of trying to find out where she is." Ethan was silent for a moment, surprised by the firmness of the woman he had always considered meek. Finally, he hung up without another word. Ethan collapsed onto the sofa, his face in his hands. He who had always prided himself on his control couldn't understand how Amelia could have escaped him. He kept repeating foolishly, "She can't not her." But the missing suitcase and the empty cradle said it all. Amelia had left. She had dared to do it. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles from Chicago, in a small, tidy apartment in a quiet Wisconsin town, Amelia was nursing Hope. The soft afternoon light shone through the window, creating sparkling patterns on the wooden floor. This apartment belonged to a friend of Liam's who had agreed to let them stay for a few weeks. It wasn't as luxurious as the penthouse, but it was warm and safe. Liam entered the room carrying a hot cup of tea for her. He smiled a sincere and warm smile. "How are you two doing?" "We're fine," Amelia replied, her voice still a little shaky but firmer. "It's just, everything is so new." "We'll get through this together," Liam said, sitting down beside her. He looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, a tender expression on his face. "She's beautiful." "Like her father," Amelia whispered, and for the first time she said it without guilt, only love. The first few days were the hardest. The fear of being found by Ethan constantly haunted Amelia. Every time the doorbell rang or a car stopped outside, her heart would pound. But Liam was always there, her rock. He helped her with Hope cooked, and most importantly, he listened to her. He listened to all the pain, the humiliation, and the fear that she had suppressed for 6 years. Gradually, Amelia began to heal. She started to laugh again, real unforced laughs. She started wearing the colorful clothes she loved. She started writing again, an old passion she had long since abandoned. In the peace of the small town, she found herself again. She knew the fight wasn't over. There would be divorce proceedings, custody battles. Ethan would not let go easily. But now she was no longer alone. She had Liam, and most importantly, she had Hope. One afternoon, while pushing Hope's stroller in a beautiful park, Amelia looked up at the clear blue sky. She took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill her lungs. She had escaped from the gilded cage. She had chosen life, chosen hope. The road ahead might not be smooth, but for the first time in a long time, it was her own, and she would walk it with her head held high, no longer a victim, but a survivor, a mother, a free woman.